welcome back to the housing sector. I hope everyone had a great Christmas. I hope everyone has put 2025 to bed, and we're here in 2026 all ready to start the new afresh. We are using a new recording software for the housing sector podcast, so we can come to you in glorious high definition. However, this is the first time using it, and me being very lackadaisical, I haven't tested it out thoroughly yet. Today we are talking to Jane and Morley Young, and we will introduce them more as we go along. And we are talking about Guildford Borough Council, one who haven't come across my radar before. Jane, thank you very much indeed for reaching out to me it was just before the Christmas period, and for raising some of the issues that you've had. Let's start at the beginning. You've moved into your new home. How long have you been there?
Actually, we moved in here in 1989, and we were tenants up until November 2016 when we took on the lease. So we then became leaseholders.
So it's fair to say it is your home, you have brought up your family, it is your community. It is not just stock on Guildford Borough Council stock sheet, it is your home.
That's absolutely right then. In fact, I was born and raised in this village, so I haven't moved very far in my lifetime at all. And I've lived here, as I say, I'm 63 now. We've actually lived here since 28th of May 1989, but I've previously lived in other areas of the village. I'm very much part of the community. I know my neighbours intimately. It's a really lovely place to live, or it was until July 2022.
And
We
what happened
received
in July 2022?
we received notification from Guildford Borough Council that they were looking to implement a replacement door and window programme within this little estate and also another area on the other side of the borough. We then contacted the Section 20 team asking them to come out and have a look because our neighbour downstairs has a pergola and we couldn't understand how they would be able to take out and replace the windows if there wasn't any scaffolding. At that point, we hadn't seen the specification of works. So 2 representatives came and met with myself and my husband. That was in August of 2022. And at that meeting, I did ask them not to schedule the works during the winter period because of my medical condition. So you might have heard of it. It's called supraventricular tachycardia. And attached to that is a secondary condition, which some people also have, and I'm one of those unlucky people. So generally with SVT, as it's commonly known, it happens when you're stressed, and your heart will just literally race off. Mine has been recorded at 274 beats per minute. And if I don't seek medical help, if I can't control it myself and get it back into sinus rhythm, I have 20 minutes to get to my local hospital and be given a drug called adenosine.
So
The
that's
secondary,
serious enough, and I don't mean to do
yeah,
that's serious. No, but it just makes sense to do these windows in summer. When we had ours replaced, it was scheduled for the summer. You don't want it in the wet, you don't want it in the rain and the wind. So it made sense. So I'm assuming they went, well, yeah, that makes sense. We'll do it in the summer.
they actually agreed and they said that they would bear my medical condition in mind. Things moved forward. We then received the specification of works. We also then received a letter from Guildford Borough Council saying that the works had gone out to tender. These were the 3 companies they wished to appoint. And I think for legal reasons, at the moment, we can't state the name of that contractor. Needless to say, within 2 or 3 weeks, we were contacted. A guy came out, supposedly measured the windows, and then we had a team arrive, asking us what date the following week would be good for the windows. And I think that was my first mistake because I didn't check the specification of works at that time. We just assumed everything would be done as it should have been done instead of happening as it did, which was a complete and utter farce. We arranged the date with them. They did our neighbours downstairs beforehand. I should point out we were in a 1st floor flat. So they did our neighbours downstairs on the 25th of April 2023, and they attended us on the 26th of April 2023. No scaffolding, no safety netting, no PPE was worn by the labour-only window fitters. Excuse me, I've got itchy nose too. And they came in within 1 hour, having left all of my windows open, the front door wide open. My husband and I were in the front room, what's technically a front bedroom, because we moved in there after my son moved out. We were in there, we had an electric heater on because we could feel the chill coming through. Within 1 hour, the team were called off site because no asbestos tests had been done. But they left a complete void in my kitchen. They'd taken out and removed that window, cut up the frame, taken it out down the stairs, and left me with a big hole. So the first thing I did was get on the phone. Tried to get in touch with the Section 20 team. They were in a meeting. Went via the repairs team. Then I got a call back from a member of the Section 20 team who told me that Morley Young would be out within the hour. The only decent thing the labour-only window fitter Lee did was say, I can't leave you like this. Shut the kitchen door. I'll put it in quick. And he did put it in quick because it was crooked. It was just all over the place, but at least there
This is
wasn't a
the
hole.
window. He put the window back in quick.
He put
Yeah.
the new window in
Okay,
because he
right.
couldn't put the old one in because they destroyed the frame. Then Morley did arrive, but on his way over to us, he was desperately trying to find out who the contractor was, what the works were, was there a contract, who signed it off, where were the various papers, and he got told we don't know.
Okay,
So
Morley, this is where you come onto the scene then, Morley. Morley, what's
Yeah.
your background and what involvement do you have here? Why were you brought in?
So I worked as a third-party consultant for a contractor who worked for Guildford Borough Council. And what they asked me to do was oversee their what's called their technical and engineering team. So they were mainly permanent staff and contractors and some other interim officers like myself. My part came in this, as Jane said there. So I was out doing something else and looking at some electrical stuff and other bits, and I got a desperate phone call. And literally the phone call said to me down the phone, we need you to get to this property, which was Jane's property. You just get over there quickly. We've got some window works going on there that no one seems to know anything about, and I certainly didn't, and I should have known about it if it was started. And we've got a serious issue now because there's a medical known thing about this lady. She's had all her windows pulled out. It's freezing cold, and it was absolutely bitterly freezing cold that day, and wind coming through. So I literally, as Jane said, and I told her about this when I got there, I'd got on the phone to our procurement team. I said, where's this window contract come from? I said, I know there was one being tendered for, but there's not as far as I'm aware, there's never been one awarded to any contractor. What it turned out is there wasn't one awarded. It hadn't been awarded at the point when they started works. There was an interim officer who I'd actually had removed 2 weeks before these works started through the sort of lady was head of the department. I said to her, look, this lady we've got interim, she's concerning me. She's not doing this right, not doing that right. She'd actually gone out rogue and said to this contractor they could start the work. So when Jane refers to people coming around measuring the windows and that was all happening by the contractor. No one at GBC at that point knew this was going on. So it was all happening. And I literally did. I turned up to Jane's and it was freezing cold inside, windows out. And as Jane rightly said, so in the specification, it said, scaffolds, safety stuff in place. I got up, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There were people hanging out of windows. There was debris all over the floor. And as Jane said, she lives in a flat upstairs. So the people below where their front door is, there was debris falling all down past this man's windows, if he'd come out his own front door, possibility of debris would have hit him. And I had a colleague with me, she came in as well. So I had to talk to Jane while I was dealing with these guys. So I say, like, who gave you permission to go on site? Who did this, who that? And he said, well, we don't know. We're just a subcontractor for the contractor. And as Jane said, with all the non-health and safety stuff going on, I asked them for something which are called RAMs, which are the risk assessments, method statements. He said, well, we haven't got any. I said, well, you haven't got your risk assessments method statement. How do you know you're meant to be working? Where's your scaffold? Why have you got ladders up? Why have you got no protection? Well, we're just doing it. And he said, and this was his actual first words to me about Jane, was she's just one of those moany residents. And that was his view, and you could see straight away when I came in, Jane, as like she said, she was huddled in a room with her husband, Richard, and you could see she was cold. You could see she wasn't well. The other officer who came with me, a lady called Lucy, could see straight away she had concerns. She came out to me and said, I don't think this lady's very well at all, because she could see it on Jane's face. So that's the part I came in. So I was a specialist consultant who came in. And I think some of the big things, like Jane said, there was no method to do it. They should have taken one window out, put another one in, another one out. There was none of that bit about actually, well, this person's at risk, so we need to do it in a special way. There was no bespoke setting for it. They just literally just ripped Jane's house apart, and left her in that freezing cold. So I was sent over, had to pick it up, as I say, and at that point, talking to everyone in the office, procurement teams, everyone else in the office, no one knew why this contractor was on site. No one had given permission, except for this rogue officer that had been removed.
Do you think this was someone just bunged her a load of cash? Yeah, we'll do that. And then it's got contracted out somewhere else down the line. Someone else has taken a handful.
Well, the difficult part for me about it, there's a couple of things about this with Jane's windows. So when Jane mentioned about they gave the specification, I know Jane mentioned the specification. When you go out to what's called the Section 20, we give this specification to leaseholders. We say we're going to get some contractors in. We specify the works. Those contractors tender against that, and there's a price obviously against that. So the specification in this particular case was for an A-rated frame, UPVC frame. So it's a bit like when you buy a washing machine. Top rated, if you get the A-rated, less wind, less cold transmission through the frame. It helps you with your energy conservation, because obviously it's less energy lost out, so you're not spending much on heating. They didn't do that. They turned up with C-rated windows, and that's what they'd been fitted into Jane's. The frames weren't right, but the frames were buckling. I know Jane wants to show it as well, but the frames were buckling. The gap around the windows was meant to be, the specification said they were allowed a 3 mil tolerance all the way around the windows. I looked at the side of this window and there was a 45 mil gap that had been filled with pink foam around one of the front windows. And that just meant what we'd just get transmission of cold, what's called cold bridging. And that would cause damp in Jane's property at a later date. It was that bad. But one of the biggest problems for me, and this is one of the reasons I've been assisting Jane with this, is if we go out and specify something under Section 20, it wasn't right. The council then wanted Jane to pay for those windows, although she didn't have them fitted, because actually we got them taken out, some proper ones fitted to decide that. But they've done this to other leaseholders, where they've actually said to them, this is the price for your window. You're getting an A-rated window, but they've actually had C-rated fitted, which actually means the council had no entitlement to charge those leaseholders, because they've fitted something that they've told them was this price, and then they've fitted something inferior to that.
It's passing off, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And when some of the other bits around this, when you look at the way this was done, because they've been allowed to fit a lower rated window, they were in at the lowest price. That was always going to happen. You could see that. So actually, in procurement law, they've also broken that, because what they've done is let these people come in at a cheap price, and they had used these people several times before. So it was obviously someone's preferred contractor. They'd used this, so they'd let someone price against other contractors, then said to the other contractors, we haven't won the contract. But actually, it was unfair, because actually, there was that, to me, in my mind, it was always that thing, well, when they're in, we're going to let them fit a C-rated window, so it won't cost them as much, so they know they can go in cheaper. And that was some of the issues around it as well.
Hey, Jane, sorry, Jane.
I'd just like to go back a little bit. C-rated windows went into the ground floor properties. B-rated went into first floor. The ones we had were B, but either way, they were not to specification.
So, Jane, you're huddled in your back room with your husband, having some communications from, I think Morley said. Where was their stance at this point? How are they working with you?
Sorry, who were GBC?
Yeah.
Well, the only person working with us was Morley. They weren't working with us.
Lucy that was there on site.
Oh, Lucy, yes, sorry. Lucy was Morley's assistant, and
okay.
So she came along with him on that occasion. I think they might have both been out at somewhere else, and so they just got themselves over here as quick as they could. Morley is quite right that I was in a very difficult situation. But at the same time, over the years, I've learned how to put myself right. Um, and Richard, my husband, knew exactly what to do. So it was extra clothing, throws, you name it. And I had that over me. And once the windows were shut, it wasn't that bad. And the heater went on, as I say, the little electric heater went on. And I did manage to calm down. But the cardiac shock element of it meant I couldn't feel my hands, I couldn't feel my feet, my cognitive abilities, everything just slows down. Instead of racing off, it slows down. And it's really very difficult to communicate.
So at the end of that day, that first day, did you have windows and front?
We had the one replaced in the kitchen, nothing else that day. Morley left and met with the legal team, but nothing else happened that day.
So have they taken out the front windows and the front door?
No, no. They did the one window
No,
on
right.
day one.
Okay. So the house,
Day
and that was secure. So you've got a window, albeit not up to standard and not fitted correctly in the kitchen, and they
Yeah,
hadn't taken out the other window at this point. Okay.
no, because
All
they'd
right.
been called off site.
So assuming at this point, and I always jump to assumptions, which is something I shouldn't do when talking about councils and housing associations. I'm assuming at this point all work stopped and we need to work out what's gone wrong and get the proper window fitted into the kitchen and then do the rest of the windows and the door on the same time. Is that right?
Yeah, so what happened then is, of course, because I'm now trying to find out, well, why is this contractor on site? No one knows. Procurement are telling me no contract. There's no contract in place, so they shouldn't be on site. No health and safety, no scaffold. They already put someone at risk. So I now get the instruction from the office. You tell these people to stop working. They are not to continue working. That's it. They must stop because it's I've reported back. So they were told to stop, not to continue. Just to shut the windows up, they could seal everything up to keep Jane warm and that, and they were to halt till we could work out actually what was going on and who had
Yeah,
given permission to start. Because
makes
no
sense.
one had it. We had no
Yeah.
health and safety documents.
Yeah.
And one of the key things, and we will talk about it in a little while with the front window coming out eventually. So, I mean, you know yourself, asbestos, it's a killer. So asbestos, they'd started work with no asbestos reports, that they had no asbestos reports. And when I said to them, why have you started work? You've had no asbestos reports. Their flippant remark to that was, well, it's Guildford Borough Council's responsibility to give them to us. And I said, yeah, I agree with that, but you don't start on work if you haven't got them. And the reason we've never given them to you is because we've not given you a contract. So why would we give them to you? You don't just go and start work. You put the residents at risk and you put your own workers at risk. So what made it worse is when they pulled the window out, they actually broke the asbestos soffit outside Jane's window. So now we've got wind, broken asbestos soffit. There's only one place the dust was going, back into Jane's property.
So now we've got, it just gets worse, doesn't it? Okay. So what are Guildford Borough Council? They've gone into panic mode and they're going to rectify this.
It didn't quite work like that because when we said stop, something happened with somewhere in the background with the legal team, and the legal team instructed, oh no, they can carry on. But we'd already said to the legal team, there's no health and safety in place. They've not got anything in place. They've not given us, it's illegal for them to carry on. And our legal team, or one particular lady in the legal team at GBC, Guildford Borough Council, just said, no, let them continue. Although despite the head of the part that I ran, a lady called Helen, she'd said, no, they're to stop. The legal person overruled her. She literally said, no, we need to let them continue. And we'd said to her, no, windows aren't as they're meant to be. No health and safety. It's against health and safety law. They cannot continue. But she instructed them to continue. And it got worse.
That was on day two, because
Yeah.
we had a call with Morley on the evening of day one when he updated us to say that he's meeting with the legal team, that the guys they could go ahead. And it was day two when they removed the bay window in the sitting room that they broke the soffit. They broke the internet cable, they broke the windowsill, and a massive crack appeared across the ceiling. So, yeah, all in all, it was just getting worse. Day to day, it was getting worse.
Let me get this
And
right.
on
The team that were kicked out on day one for not having the RAMs, not having the asbestos report, not having approval, not having a contract, from what the sound of it, came back on day two and took out the bay window and then caused all this other damage. because the head of legal at Guildford Borough Council had said, no, let them back in, let them continue.
Yeah, she told us we couldn't stop them. We had to let them continue, despite myself and the actual lady who was in charge of the technical team that I worked under as a consultant saying, no, they shouldn't. She was completely overruled by the lady in the legal team, although we said to her, there's no contract in place. And when we got back there, considering what had happened the first day again, there was no real consideration for Jane's health again that day because they're pulling out great big windows. You know, it's still windy, it's still freezing cold. You know, there wasn't any of that, well, let's step back a minute and what extra do we need to do for this lady to make sure she's safe and okay? It just wasn't. And I turned up again, ladders up, you know, to windows, no scaffolding, no PPE on, nothing at all. You know, it was just complete. I've never seen anything like it, really. So, you know, and still no RAMs, no method statements, how they were going to do things.
I think
No, no consideration
one
for
of the
their
really-
safety either with health and safety and asbestos. So these guys are still working in what their employer now knows is dangerous.
Yeah. And one of the roles Lucy did was look after asbestos. So we had to make emergency phone calls and get an asbestos company out there. Literally, as they took a window out to check the windows all round it to make sure there's no more asbestos.
And then they need a license to get rid of this asbestos as well, don't they? And as sure as eggs, I don't suppose they got one.
Well, they won't have. So with the specialist company came out, but we don't know what happened to the slab they broke. We just don't know where it was. It was just broken out. We never, you know, I never got possession of it. So I'm sure they just threw it somewhere, along with the rest of the debris, no doubt.
All right. How did day 3, 4, and 5 continue?
Day 2, we told Morley we didn't want them back. We just
Which is
said,
fair
I'm
enough.
sorry, we don't want them back. Because by that time, the bay window, the new window they put in the bay, it wasn't straight. In fact, it was that far out on the brickwork that they used some kind of adhesive along the gutter to hold it in place. And it was a mess. The bedroom window they'd done that day, they had to resite the kitchen window on day 2. And when he put it in on the second time, he screwed it in so far, he cracked the frame. So that had to come out again eventually. The big window in the bedroom was done, and the window on the landing was done. And on the landing, where they took it out, I happened to hear one of the guys swearing quite profusely because as they pushed it out, they'd taken a chunk of plaster out of the wall and then they filled it with silicone. They didn't replaster at all. They filled it with silicone. It was just, yeah. End of day 2.
I literally got a call from Jane again. She was actually falling apart. But, you know, day 1 had been bad enough. We was talking about day 1, okay, we're putting it on hold. Then we're instructed by legal team, no, it goes ahead. So I went straight back down there and said to these people, enough's enough. Jane doesn't want it done. We're not doing it. Got back onto phone to GBC and said, look, the lady here does not want them in their house. We've got to pull them out immediately. So we had to literally close up everything we could in the best way it could. But they'd wrecked her house. Like she said, the internet had been cut and it was a case of, well, those things happen. No, those things don't happen if you take care, you take methods. And like Jane said, that windows, like I say, it was circa, because we got the tape measure out, it was circa 45 millimetres of pink foam. It's got no insulation, you know. It's not going to make any difference. So at that point, Jane said, I don't want it. I totally agreed because that's when I picked up on the frames of the windows as well being the wrong rating and said they're not even the right ones. They shouldn't be fitting these. And that was it. We stopped them. And from that point, what we then did is engaged a different company to come and do Jane's windows. They came out. It took quite a while to get sorted because, of course, we had to remanufacturers, 6-7 weeks. Jane had to live with all the devastation and the damage through that point. I can't remember if you, Jane, or we arranged someone for your internet connection to be reconnected. One of us did, didn't we? I can't remember if it was us or you. But
We did, but it was quite funny because when they broke it, Richard and I were both in that front room trying to work, and of course the internet went off. So he was the first one in, and the internet cable had been broken, and he said, "I really asked you to be quite careful because of the internet connection where it comes into the property, and because there was no window in the bay at the time, one of the guys just said, 'Here, come on up and fix this. So they came up and they used a kind of junction thing to get the two wires together and hold it together so we could get the internet connection back. But then we got BT out and BT didn't charge us.
Yeah. It's just like, they just sound like cowboys. Am I wrong to make that assumption?
No, you're
No.
totally right. You're totally right. The language they used about Jane, you know, she's just a moany resident, especially on day 2 when I came back down. Oh, she's just moaning again. No, she's not moaning. I can see why she's saying what she's saying, because you've wrecked her house.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that was their attitude, you know. And it ended up in quite a confrontation with me and them, because I was getting more and more angry with them, because I could see, you know, the impact. And it was impact on Jane. And it was impacting on her husband, Richard. I could see Richard, especially in relation to Jane, you could see the concern on his face for Jane. You know, he was generally worried about her health. I was getting worried about health, because you could see, although she was handling it, she was, you know, it was affecting her. You could tell in a big way. And the thing around the asbestos, even worse. Like I said, okay, so they know they have to have an asbestos report before they do anything, and their excuse being, well, you hadn't given it to us. Well, no, because you hadn't got a contract with us. And secondly, if they'd asked for it, to be honest, we wouldn't have been able to give it, because GBC at that point of time had no proper asbestos register, and I believe they still haven't got one fully at the moment for all their properties. None at all. It just didn't exist. So they were negligent just in that alone. You know, and the contractor itself was just a complete, you know, we can't name who they are, but they're just a complete cowboy company. Absolutely.
So Guildford Borough Council don't have any idea of the state of the stock, what windows are going into their homes, and if they do, they're perhaps, and I'll be careful with my wording here, Christ knows I get into enough trouble for things I do say that are correct, let alone when they're not. But there's some discretion over the windows, whether they're the right type of window, and if there's a cost cutting going on and where this money's going on. We've got an interim person who is approving contracts that shouldn't be. We've then got the head of legal saying, no, go ahead, still go ahead with it, even though we've discovered asbestos, we've got the wrong size windows. What a Guildford Borough Council, you know, and Morley, you're independent of them at this point, aren't you? You're a contractor as well.
So I'm what's called a third-party consultant. And what makes it worse, when you mentioned about the windows, Jane was lucky in some ways. Eventually, she got a proper set of windows because we did it through another contractor. But it still wrecked her house. We still had to go back and put lots of things right in her house, which Guildford didn't want to do originally. And I was like, look, we've got no argument with this. The damage was done by a contractor. They weren't in contract, but they damaged her house. So we had to do lots of things. But when you talk about windows in general in GBC, so because I worked in that section, or as a consultant for that section, where they'd look at all the asset data, the asset data showed, and still to date, I believe it definitely will be, because like Jane said, hardly any windows have been done. When I was working as third-party consultant, at that point, about 90% of GBC's windows, so circa 4,800 properties, had windows that didn't meet the decent home standard in relation to security and safety. Two things being about them were that in the old days, the trim in a window would be in the outside. So you could pop the trim out, pull the window out. They were like that, all their windows. And there's still masses and masses of windows, thousands of houses in GBC at the moment that have still got that external trim, and they're still not rushing to replace them. But they don't meet decent home standard. But when they report their decent homes figures, they don't highlight that. And that's just one area, the windows. But this around Jane's was it was horrific what went on. And what made it worse, when Jane started to pursue this as a claim, which she should have done because of the harm and damage and all that, there were several things happening. I'll let Jane explain alone. But one of the big things I had to bring to Jane, because I wasn't working for GBC at that point when she moved this further on, was the truth, because she was asking questions. They were hiding the truth about all sorts of things from her. She didn't know. And then we had a conversation. I said, Jane, I can give you the proof for that. I can tell you the details. So she's been able to use some of that to actually pursue Guildford Council still on this matter, because they just purely lied to her. And even, Jane can explain what the CEO said to her recently about the Ombudsman. I'll let Jane explain that to you now. And that was just a pack of lies from the new CEO.
Okay, so Jane, look, we all make mistakes, don't believe me, take my wife's word for it. We all make mistakes. Guildford Borough Council have clearly made some mistakes. They've engaged with you in a positive way, and they said, look, we've dropped the ball here. Here's how we're going to rectify it. Here's how we're going to fix your home. And here's what we're going to do to make sure you and your husband are healthy, safe, and secure in your own home. Yep.
Only through Morley. If it had not been for Morley Young, we would have literally, I felt so low on one occasion when, as Morley says, they hired another contractor who took out the first set of windows, the 4 that were done, and replaced all of them within our home. But when they took the kitchen window out, the amount of plaster that was brought down, because the first contractor, when they put the frames in, didn't buff it up enough because they couldn't, because it didn't have any scaffolding. Come on. Sorry, I'm trying to charge up here and it's not doing it. Bear with me a minute.
Yeah, I mean, literally, Ben, to initially, they
better.
tried to ignore Jane's claims. You know, that's exactly what they tried to do.
They've done it constantly,
If they're ignoring it because they've also got the head of legal, and that sounds to me like that's a defensive mood. No, we've got to let them continue now, let them deal with it. So, Jane, where are we with Guildford Borough Council now?
Well, they finally agreed not to charge us for the first set of windows, not to charge us for the second set of windows. But they have basically said that the Ombudsman only awards up to £1,000 in compensation. That is a blatant lie.
Yes, absolutely. I can testify for that myself. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another lie. This
I think
coming
there's an
April,
extra
it'll be
bit to that,
3
Jane,
years.
isn't there? There's an extra bit to that, because what they actually said to Jane was the Ombudsman can only give you up to £1,000, but as a goodwill gesture,
Yeah.
actually, we're going to offer you 1,500.
1,500.
And that was to keep it, I'm assuming, off the Housing Ombudsman's books.
Oh, 100%. 100%. They thought they could bluff Jane. And Jane said to me, Morley, that's not right, is it? And I said, no, Jane. And I sent her, so you've probably seen it recently, Ben, you know, places like Lewisham and others, the Ombudsman's been looking into it. They've been awarding 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds to people. And that new CEO there at the moment blatantly put it in writing, a lie to Jane, to say, well, you know, take the 1,500 quid. It's a good offer, because the Ombudsman will only give you £1,000. That's the maximum they can award. Well, you know, CEO, that's top man in that council, is blatantly lied to Jane. Blatantly lied.
So you went to the Housing Ombudsman, Jane?
Yeah. It's with them at the moment.
It's still with them at the minute?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got an update on that to come. Okay, where are we now, guys?
Losing.
Yeah, Morley, where are we now, guys? Because Jane's cutting in and out there.
Yeah, so Jane,
I'm losing you. I don't know why.
So yeah, she went to the Ombudsman and she's waiting. I think they've got till next week to do a response to it, because Guildford have just tried to wash their hands of it. And I think some of the extra bits around this, you know, to add on to this insult, to what I consider insult to the rest of the Guildford residents and leaseholders, this company that went in there originally to do the windows, they carried on to manufacture windows. Then they said to Guildford, well, we've manufactured them, so you've got to buy them. And I said to the legal team again, don't buy them. They're not the right rating. They don't meet the specifications. We've measured some. They're not designed. Legal pursued forward with this. And again, against what I guided as a specialist consultant, against what the lady who was the head of the department I worked, you know, or assisted, she said, no, we shouldn't do it. Again, legal overruled and said, well, no, because we're sort of in a contract. We said, we're not in a contract. Nothing was signed. They've created the wrong windows. You know, they're not right. They will cause people damp and mold quickly in a few years. They're not energy efficient.
I'm back. Can you hear me, guys?
I literally sent an email to the head of legal, as she was at the time, and she's still there now, saying, if you install these windows, in a few years, we're going to have damp and mold in people's properties. It's going to seriously affect their health and everything. And the email I got back literally said, noted. And they continued to buy them. So they spent £400,000 on windows, bought windows from, they didn't let the people fit them originally. It was said, well, they're not fitting them, because there was a big argument, because we brought in another specialist consultant. So it was sort of removed from me a bit, a specialist consultant to say, like a health and safety one, to take them on and say, you know, you make sure they've got the correct health and safety stuff. He reviewed it with them. He went over and over it again and tried to get the correct health and safety documents out of them. They couldn't provide it all properly. So said to them, look, they can't start on site. But the legal person eventually agreed to that they couldn't carry on site, but still said, oh, we have to buy the windows. But I said, they're not the right specification. You can't charge the leaseholders for these, because you told them you're getting one thing built and you're getting another. And a short while after that, I actually left Guildford a little while after that, But I know, you know, they bought the windows, they were brought to site, and they've had those windows fitted into other people's properties. Other leaseholders have been charged with them. And this is one of the reasons I think Guildford are trying to hide a lot of this, because we've been trying to get this out there to people. And to be fair, Guildford Dragon, as the newspapers push some of it, but it's getting that message out to leaseholders. Actually, you need to go back to Guildford and say, hang on, you've charged me for all this. You've given me something that wasn't the correct window, wasn't the correct specification. Actually, is not going to lower my heating bills. And how many other people's properties did they go in and disturb asbestos that was hidden? And for Jane's, like Jane's there would say they broke that asbestos. And it was, I don't know why they did it, but like about a year and a half ago now, where Jane lives, there's a group of sort of two-storey flat things in the road. They went and removed all the other asbestos soffits from all the other buildings, left one set right outside Jane's window, didn't remove her. She had to get onto him and say, you need to come and remove my soffits as well. So it was like, to me, it seemed like a bit of spite. We'll remove everyone else's, but we'll leave them there. But they went back and did it after she had to contact them. So now she's in this situation where she's, you know, and I totally agree. And, you know, you've heard of the Ombudsman cases, you know, Jane's health was seriously affected. Richard's health was affected because you could see, as I said, you could see the worry, concern on his face. It just wasn't fair. They've been so mistreated and for so long lied to. And, you know, I don't get paid for helping Jane, but it's the right thing to do. You know, I've spent hours with her. I've been down to see her. I've talked to her. I've given her some guidance. I've given her stuff that I know about so she can fight this cause. But she spent days, weeks trying to talk to them, and they've just blatantly lied to her. You know, so many times.
Morley, you're a man after my own heart. We support people without pay, and that's not right, but we do it because it is right.
It's safe.
I think what we need to do now is this is with the housing ombudsman, and as we've unfortunately lost Jane, despite all my ringing of the bell at the beginning about this being the first podcast for the year, it may well be the second. We need to get you back after the housing ombudsman. So we'll get this out as a part one. We'll get the housing ombudsman, and I need to reach out to Guildford Borough Council with a right to reply and find out what their side is, and perhaps we can get there.
Yeah.
Morley, thank you so much for everything you're doing. Thank you very much indeed. Let's end the recording there. And guys,
Ben, when I was going to say, when we do the second one, though, you know, it'd be good to widen this aspect on Guildford and what we know.
Yeah.
Because like when I first went there, just a couple of things we maybe pick up on the next one. When I first went as a third-party consultant, I was to check some of the electrical stuff. And there's a couple of issues that, you know, for every, like, you know, a residence property now, especially, it's law must have electrical certificate. For their circa 5,500 properties, they had just over 300 electrical certificates. There was over 5,000 properties with no electrical safety certificate. There were 2 blocks of flats there that were waiting to be the next Grenfell. What they call the rising mains through them had deteriorated such a state they were ready to catch on fire. When that was identified by another interim consultant who came in to work on the electrics alongside me, we took this to the permanent officer who was meant to be controlling it and said to him, we found this. He went, oh yeah, I know about that. So he said, well, why have you never changed these cables? This is a fire waiting to happen. And his actual response to us was, it would have been a lot of hard work and would have cost a lot of money. You know, that's the electrical. Then we had the same around the fire stuff. They had 2,500 plus fire actions, some over 3 years, not done. We had to take all that on. You know, it is crazy. There's so much wrong down there.
I'm hearing it about so many different councils now. Birmingham City Council being one of them that we've already covered. Morley, let's end this call here. Let's revisit it, and let's get a right to reply over to Guildford Borough Council and get their side of it. And then it'd be great to have you both back on to discuss it. Morley, stay where you are for now. Thank you very much, everyone who's tuned in. This is obviously going to continue into a part 2. Thank you for supporting the housing sector in any way you can. Please, if you can support, give us a subscription and a like. I know people always moan on about this, but it does certainly help. For the meantime, that's it. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll be back with part 2 in a couple of weeks.